So thank you so much once again joining Asima Sarmaji from Jaipur, Manipal University, Department of Economics. You are a researcher scholar, and it's a possibility and opportunity for RESO platform to have scholars and researchers and academicians like people like you in order to make quantitative and qualitative body of data into various domains in order to make our society more better. So our topic is very important today. It's time poverty and gender inequality, understanding the burden of unpaid work on women. So it's thank you so much covering this topic for our audience and coming on this platform. So would like to move on to my first question, which is an important question, says what exactly is time poverty and how does it disproportionately affect women?
Thank you so much, first of all, Dr. Surinder, for having me on your channel today. The issue of time poverty and gender inequality is quite significant, and I'm glad we are bringing more visibility to it through your channel, through your platform. I've seen some of your work also. You are also working on, human rights and climate change, gender equality, which is commendable. And on top of that, you are also ALA fellow at University of Melbourne, Australia, I guess. So it's really commendable. Thank you once again. And coming on to your question, what exactly is time poverty? So if time poverty is to be explained simply, it means lack of adequate time, or we can say the discretionary time left for rest, leisure, or any other income generating activity. So this is basically all due to overwhelming demands of paid and unpaid work. And if we see the ILO, International Labour Organization, that ILO has set this threshold that we as the researchers often use in our empirical literature, that if an individual is working 630 to 720 minutes of total work per day, beyond that time, an individual is considered a time poor. Coming on to the next part of your question, how does it disproportionately affect women? So women are disproportionately affected by it because they are disproportionately carrying the primary burden of unpaid care. Say, for example, they are doing cooking, they're cleaning the household, they're taking care of children, they're taking care of elders, they're taking care of the sick in the family. So even when women are, full-time workers, they are doing their work in 3 shifts. They're working in the household in the morning, then the second shift is their paid work, and then they are returning home to the third shift of unpaid responsibilities. And mind you, this trend is global. Although the intensity might differ, like for developed nations, the differences between time allocation of men and women must be little there is less differences, but in developing nations the difference is quite huge. So globally, women are performing 3 to 4 times more unpaid work than men, except for Denmark, where I guess men are performing 4 to 5 minutes extra of unpaid work. So that's that way we can say that women are disproportionately affected by time poverty more than men.
It's certainly very important, body of data that you talked about, and something very striking is like the global trending, which you mentioned, like, and their second work, they're working in shifts, they're working paid and then non-paid at home, and the trend is global. So that's a matter of concern for
Yes.
academicians and researchers as well. So would like to move on to my
Right.
second question. Important questions is why is unpaid work by women often invisible or undervalued in our society?
You see, the unpaid work is primarily invisible because it is not counted in the GDP. First of all, it is not considered in the national income statistics, making it economically invisible. So if you look at the traditional economists, they have always focused on GDP and the monetary related issues, excluding the essential contributions made by women in the economy. So the first feminist inquiry into the definition of work was done by Margaret Reid in 1930s, where she came up with this third principle criterion, whereby she says that if a third person is hired to do the same work, that work is considered as a work. For example, if I am a woman, I'm cooking, it was not considered work. But if we hire a third person to do the same job, it is work. So that way, many economists, neoclassical economists, they come up with they extended this household labor significance, and Gary Becker was the next economist who came up with the idea of household labor significance in his book Theory of Allocation of Time. And again in 1988, if you know Marilyn Warren, she is the famous renowned economist, feminist economist, and also the former parliamentary of New Zealand. She came up with her groundbreaking book, If Women Counted. That was the critical indictment of United Nations System of National Accounts, SNA, System of National Account, which systematically excluded unpaid care from economic indicators like GDP. So all these efforts made by several feminist economists have tried to, they have tried to culminated in the 1995 Beijing Platform for Action, which marked the first official global commitment to recognize and redistribute and measure unpaid work by the women. Secondly, if you see, it is always viewed as a natural responsibility of women to do all the household work, to do all the unpaid work, rather than a form of labor. It is not considered as a form of labor. That is why it is often undervalued in our society. And most of the reason for this undervaluation is our cultural and gender norms that reinforce the idea that women are naturally better at caregiving, and it hides the skills and efforts that are involved in caregiving. So that is the reason it is always often invisible and undervalued in the society.
But as you said, like your final wrap-up statement, women are considered as natural caregiver or caretaker. That's like some of the narratives I came across during COVID-19 post-study research. So I was going through some of the quantitative and qualitative data. So I learned that kind of narrative there also. So thanks a lot once again, reconfirmation on that. Would like to move on to my third question, which very important question says, how does time poverty impact women's access to education, employment, and leisure?
Decreases per capita income will increase. So all these changes, or we can say all these growth, must have led to narrowing of gender gap. But despite these favorable conditions, female labor force participation has not seen substantial growth on average. And this is because of certain barriers, including involvement of women in unpaid work that restrict them from several jobs. Right? Studies have shown, if you look at the studies literature, they have shown that how marriage and childbearing has affected women's time. As you also mentioned, COVID-19. So even in COVID-19, several studies pointed out that women's work has increased before pre-COVID time. Right? So they pay a penalty for marriage, for motherhood. And there is a very beautiful term also in literature, motherhood penalty. Because the society, the companies, they would want to hire less of female workers who have a babies, because they know most of the time will be allocated towards motherhood. And there is a fatherhood premium. That means if there is a man who is a father also, companies would like to hire them. So this is very grave also, and in order to do both paid and unpaid work, women generally opt for informal jobs. They opt for home-based jobs, which can easily be combined with paid work. So they try to opt, and this leads to lower income of women, their limited career progression, and significant economic insecurity. And if you look at leisure and their health, studies have shown that women have musculoskeletal diseases more than men. There is less leisure time for females than men. And this chronic time poverty contributes to stress and their poor mental health. So yes, that's how it impacts their overall well-being also.
So much giving your comments like, there's always a disparity and incompatibility between men being paid and women being paid, and their circumstances, socioeconomic and physical challenges that I come across. Would like to move on to my fourth question is, can you share any real life example or data that highlight this gender gap in unpaid work?
See, absolutely. If you want to see the real life example, you can see real life examples anywhere around you, even in your own home. Who is doing more unpaid work? Either it's your mother, either it's your wife or your daughter. Women are doing more unpaid work than men. And data, fortunately, India now have its own data that can, that can show these disparities. So in 2019, India came up with its first time use survey. It's a comprehensive survey done on all the states of India, and somewhere around 4,54,000 people were interviewed, and simple questions like how do you spend your day were, they were collected to give broader understanding of socio-economic disparities between men and women. So fortunately we have our first time use survey 2019, which tells how the reality of extreme type poverty, which is gripping Indian women. So, and data, you take OECD data, you take ILO data. OECD data says that women do two more hours of unpaid work per day than men. ILO says that women do 4 times more unpaid work than women. Even our India's time use survey says that women do 5 hours of unpaid work per day and men do less than 2 hours of that work. So there are disparities that there are data that shows that highlights this gender gap in unpaid work.
Important because we do have historical data at the back of us, like specifically our context, also developing nations, also this gender gap, and this has to be addressed by researchers, academicians. Thanks a lot for that. Would like to move on to my fifth question, which is also a wrap-up question. Says, what policy changes or social reforms are needed to address this imbalance effectively? I would also like to, sort of request you if, since like, B.R. Ambedkar, he's done tremendous work specifically for Dalits and women as well. It's not just, confined to one particular domain. So could you just give a comment on that?
We need major policy change. Actually, we need systematic changes at multiple levels. You see, the rapid increase in the aging population, it implies that there will be a growing demand for family care and health care, meaning women will likely continue to bear the responsibility of caregiving. Even in the COVID, as you also mentioned, we see how care crisis can come up and how government or the institutions, they were dependent on the women for caregiving roles, right? So this addressing this time poverty requires systematic changes at multiple levels: policy reform, social norms. We need to change the institutions, we need to change our infrastructure for that matter. So first of all is we need to recognize and measure unpaid work. So you see, the time use survey is a very important survey, and India took its first time use survey in 2019, whereas US, UK or other developed nations, they have been doing it since years, and every year they come up with time use survey data. So India should conduct regular time use survey to capture gender patterns of labor, and it should include its unpaid work in GDP calculations or satellite national accounts. Second is we need to invest in public services and infrastructure. If you see, like, I belong to Rajasthan, I am doing my research on Rajasthan. So the interior areas of Rajasthan, if you go to Jaisalmer or interior beyond Jaisalmer, so you will see that women are still fetching water from the, they're still fetching water which is consuming very, very good amount of their day. So until or unless we do not free their time from that unpaid work, we cannot expect them to do some other paid work. So we need such infrastructure where we provide them with the good, drinking water, piped water. So yes, we need to work on infrastructure. Second is we need accessible childcare centers, elder care facilities that can free up women's time at multiple levels. For poor, it should be different. For rich, it should be different. Even the workplaces should have crutches and all. So these are some of the ways through which we can free up women's time and bring them into the paid work. We can also work for promoting shared responsibility. We have maternity policies, but we have very less paternity leave policies. We need to come up with incentives for men to share household tasks. We need some educational campaigns to challenge gender roles from a very young age, right? And we need some improvements in labor policies also. Like there should be flexible working conditions, working arrangements without penalizing career growth. And we should also ensure that fair wages and social security should be provided to women, right? So these are, I think, some of the ways through which a change can be brought up. So to conclude, I would just say that time poverty is not just about hours, it's about rights, it's about justice. It's the unequal burden of unpaid work is a hidden engine of gender inequality. And as our Nobel laureate Amrita Sen emphasized, that development must not consider just the income, but freedoms and capabilities, including time. So time is a very important factor. By recognizing, by redistributing, by reducing the burden of women, we not only empower women, but we also move towards a more equitable and sustainable society.
I learned that penalizing career growth for women, that's like striking and certainly a matter of concern. Thanks a lot once again. We talked about time poverty and gender inequality, understanding burden of unpaid work on women, and we talked about like poverty and how it disproportionately affect women, and then unpaid work, women invisible and undervalued work, and impacting like women's access education, employment, labor. And we've also shared gaps, gender gap, and your personal experience, and then you talk policy changes and social reforms, how to address. And I would like to once again thank you joining RESO platform, giving your precious time, as you're already familiar that RESO is a platform where we try to step through the noise to cause you most relevant and reliable social explanations in order to expand and enhance the very possible dimensions of our society. That's the very purpose, maintaining quantitative and qualitative database for the betterment of researchers, academicians, and lay people as well, the overall possibility of societal development. So once again, thank you so much, ma'am, joining the so platform.